Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of At the Table. As always, I'm so just thankful. I'm humbled that you're joining me for another episode. And I hope that you've been encouraged through season 2. And right now, specifically, we're going through the calling of Eve, and we're talking about women and the church. And so for this episode, I actually invited on Jana, and many of you may know her if you're connected to Church Answers, if you've maybe been a part of our products or even customer service experience. But Jana is a big piece. I mean, she is literally the backbone, I think, to our Church Answers organization and ministry. And so, Jana, I'm so glad you're with me today on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored that you asked. It's good to be here.
Yeah, little hesitant to say yes. I get to be your very first podcast interview. So I'm
You
pretty
do.
pumped about that, honestly. I feel like I need to get you a plaque or something that you can hang on your wall behind you.
That's true. You are the very first one and probably the only one, Jackie.
I don't know about that. Well, at least I have to do around 2, maybe 3. But Jana, I think, has so many talents. Oh my goodness, so many giftings. And whenever I was breaking out just the schedule for this season and thinking through ways that women contribute to the kingdom and to the church, Jana really was one of the first ones that kind of came to mind because so often women are serving kind of in administrative roles, maybe in like personnel, being able to do HR. I mean, there's so many ways that women are working in offices, in a long nonprofit organizations, customer experience, all kinds of things. They are bringing order to the chaos, which, if you remember from the beginning of this season, that is a huge way that we are able to image God, that God has given us that cultural mandate and that we are able to bring life and order and goodness to everything that is around us. And so I think Jana does that. So before we get into this conversation, I want you to be able to kind of share a little bit about you, maybe tell our listeners where are you from, your family, all of those fun things.
Sure. I am a native born Georgian, Jackie. I was born and raised north of Atlanta, probably the only one of very few that are left here in this area, native Georgian. I grew up in a family. I have two siblings. I'm the only daughter and the youngest, and grew up going to a small country Baptist church with my family. I trusted Jesus at the age of 10 and have followed him ever since. My relationship has gotten stronger the older I've gotten, but I did trust him at the age of 10. I am married to Adam. I've been married for 37 years. We have three grown children, adult children, 2 boys and a girl. And our daughter is married to a wonderful man, and they have our 3 grandchildren who we absolutely love and adore. They're 5 and under.
Oh,
Um,
goodness.
it's very, very busy at our house. And just this past weekend, we moved my mom in here. She is 89 years old, so she lives with us now. So we have a really busy household. My grandchildren don't live here, but they're very close by. So yes, we have a very busy life. A little bit about my background. I finished school after I got married. Funny story is when my husband asked my dad if he can marry me, my dad said yes, but she has to finish school. I was in the midst of going to school. I'm the first one to finish college in our family. And so my dad knew it was important to me, and I think it was important to them. And so it took me, I was on the 7-year plan, but it took me it took me a while, and then I was in the corporate world in human resources, and then after I had my second baby, I decided that I wanted to stay home and raise our kids. But our first was actually born with complications and was later diagnosed to be on the autistic spectrum. So he's highly functional, and that led us to actually homeschooling. Because of his situation and his challenges. And so we began homeschooling, which then led to my first opportunity of leadership outside of the corporate world. A dear friend of mine started a ministry for homeschooling families to offer academic and enrichment classes. And she actually left to go start it at another church. And a friend of mine stepped into leadership. And I did that for about 19 or 20 years. And at the time, we had over 1,000 students at that ministry.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, it was amazing. But after my kids finished school, I felt like the Lord led me away from that ministry. And long story short, Belay Solutions placed me with Church Answers and Tom Rayner. And this coming November, I will have been at Church Answers for 7 years.
Awesome. Okay. So many things there. So many things. So very much your current life, like all different kinds of stages, empty nesting, but then also the beautiful opportunity and privilege of getting to care for your mom in her age and in those kind of things, and grandbabies and all of that. But I love the fact that you and I share this. So my dad said the exact same thing whenever Josh came and asked.
Really?
Yes. And same, my parents didn't go to church. My dad was, or not church, school. My dad
Yes.
was military. And so he's like, she is going to finish her degree. And so, yep, 7, 8, 9 year plan. But I love that. And then I think just
Yes.
being able to hear and see in the different seasons how you were able just to bring your gifts and bring even your life stage and circumstances of like, okay, this is a shift. This is something that is hard even on our family in different ways. But being able to turn that and use that as an opportunity, not only to serve your son, but then so many families around you in the homeschool community. So I'm telling you, you've got so many gifts, so many stories and nuggets of wisdom that I'm really pumped to kind of get out of you this episode. So let's kind of go here, I think, because if you're listening and maybe you serve like as an administrative assistant or you're a secretary, or maybe you're like managing the chaos of being a stay-at-home mom or homeschooling mom, those kind of things. There really is this beauty, I think, that God has given us to be able to bring order from chaos. And whether that's like a ton of toys on the floor or just a ton of to-dos in the day. So tell me, even as you kind of look back, not only here at your role at Church Answers, but even as a homeschooling mom, as being able to be in the corporate world, like talk to me a little bit about how God grew that gift in you, because you're incredible at it. I mean, you juggle so many things. So how do you see even God giving you that gift and being able to use that for the good of people around you?
Wow, that's a lot, James,
I know.
to unpack, to bring chaos. I love the way you say it, to bring organization to chaos. I like to think almost of, bringing not peace, but that kind of um, makes me think that bringing peace to chaos. I think back even, as a homeschool mom and then leading a ministry, and then even sometimes the chaos we experience on our team. I wouldn't call it chaos, just change. I think that for whatever reason, the God has gifted me to be able to be flexible and to move. I think the important thing is to keep the mission in mind first and foremost, because I think so many times we can get bogged down on I've got to get this task done and this work has to be done. I love checklists, Jackie. I absolutely love checklists. You probably do too. So we can get really caught up in that. Oh, I can't do this because this is on my list. Whereas God has a whole different plan. He doesn't. We don't know that when we start the morning. But so if we try to just keep that overall mission in mind, whatever that might be, is to, today with my small kids, if I can just do this one thing and maybe have food on the table, I've accomplished that in the midst of toys on the floor, being in the bathroom and the little hands underneath the door, whatever that might look like. It's just to keep in mind your overall mission. And to me, that brings peace when I'm feeling chaos inside. I might not always look like it, but there's chaos inside sometimes, and I just have to step back and remember the true mission that or the ultimate mission, and as a mother that was raising my kids to love the Lord first and foremost, is to raise Christ followers. And so now mission at Church Answers is serving pastors and local churches. And so that's my overall mission. And so even when we have change and pivots, challenges, issues, just to keep that main mission in mind. Doesn't always take out the chaos that I might feel on the inside, but it does help.
Yeah, I feel like that word pivot kind of became a trigger word,
Oh my
especially
goodness.
coming out of COVID, because everyone was pivoting all of the time. And it's like, I don't want to pivot anymore. Like, just give me some normalcy. So
Yeah.
would you say, like, okay, so was that something that you had to grow into? Was that something that, like, but kind of really honestly by learning from reacting the wrong way. Like, tell me, I think, because you're a seasoned leader now. I mean, you've been doing this a while, so I'm sure I would hope that it gets easier. At least I'm banking on that. But maybe what are some practical things that do help keep the mission in mind? But in that moment, when you get that email and all of a sudden all of this work has come on, that you've been trudging with and pouring into, and it's erased or it's, no longer needed anymore. Like, what maybe helped you become more adaptable as a leader? What may be like, I don't know, was it some wisdom? Was it just some daily practices? Like, is there anything that you would maybe kind of coach some of us that aren't so flexible and maybe like extreme A types? What would help?
I get that because I have to tell you, when I started in the ministry, the homeschool ministry that I led, one, I did not like conflict. And when you're serving teachers, parents, and students, there is, I always say relationships is where, for me, God sanctifies me the most is through my relationships. Mm-hmm. And so I started out, I don't like conflict today, but I started out, I really didn't like dealing with conflict. So along the way, with bumps in the road and with making mistakes along the way, I've learned, I really leaned into peacemaking. I really looked into that, read a lot about it because I felt like I was really faced with a lot of interpersonal challenges in terms of the ministry I led. And so leaning into the peacemaking aspect of that and realizing that what's in front of me, whether that be a hard email, whether that be I've worked really hard and now it's all, we're changing, or it's a mom or dad walking in the door upset, is to lean in is that they're coming with their own what they've experienced. And so to step back and say, this is not a personal thing for me. It's not personal against me. It's just, so they're bringing what they've been through to the table. And so I try not to look at it personal, but to really get to the root. So those hard conversations, just relying on truth and not having to be right, but only being responsible for my response. I'm not responsible for how they receive it or their response back to me. I'm only responsible for mine. I have learned that very hard ways, by making mistakes. And that's the beauty of, I think, being flexible is that learning from those mistakes that I've made is that I can take that and say, okay, you know what? Maybe I didn't respond so well. They were right, maybe in this one situation. I need to step back, rethink, and then next time handle it this way.
Girl, I feel like you're stepping on some toes, but also really giving some good truth, because just that learning approach or that humility or adaptability really is where so much of that gets played out, right? And wrestled out of us. And I think you saying, I don't have to be right. I don't have to, make my case and those kind of things. Are often the times where we start to try to grab hold of more control, and that we are going to show how right we are, and our fists get more tight, which would be exactly against that peacemaking that you're talking about. Instead of going into situations and recognizing it's not about me, like it's not about my rights, it's not about what I'm going to get out of this, but really truly trying to meet in the middle and see people as people, which I know we're going to talk about here in a little bit. And so I think those are really good reminders. I think we know that, especially if we work with people a lot, but it's also really easy, I think, to maybe take several blows or several hits or feel disrespected, and then just to kind of bitter up and get frustrated and mad and not be gracious or not be humble. So I think that's really good, but also really hard in practice.
Yes. And I haven't done it right. And even to this day, Jackie, I mean, I thought I can take offense, or I can, close my hands and not be open-handed in those situations. But it's definitely been as my daughter said, it's practice makes progress. So,
really good. All right. So here's kind of another thing that I think, as I have watched you in our staff meetings and working with different people, but then also having conversations, I think, with women that are maybe the secretary at their church or an administrative assistant, those kind of things. That typically they end up being, especially kind of like smaller churches or maybe smaller organizations, they are the only woman in the room and, serving alongside pastors, male leaders, brothers. And that's a distinct role, right? Like that's a distinct place of privilege, but can also be a really difficult way to navigate, like, okay, how much do I say? How much do I push forward to advocate for this thing that we've been working on, or when the pivots come or changes come. So can you maybe give some of your wisdom on what it feels like to be the only woman in the room and to not only minister well alongside our brothers, but then also really kind of have that differentiating mindset of, all right, I have a place at the table and God has put me here. And so not just shrinking back, I think, in insecurity too. So I know this could really open up so many different places. So I'm excited to see where you go, and then we'll kind of take it from there. But what do you got?
What I have, I have, it may be unusual, but I have had very positive experiences when I have been working with brothers in ministry or working with or for men. So I've had really positive experiences. Now, I know that not everyone has had those positive experiences. So I think, even for me, having those, I think what we really have to lean into is the confidence of the gifting that God has given us. Not even just the giftings that He's given us as a person, but the giftings He's given us as women. Right. Because we might not react the same way as men, but we have been gifted, and the things that we've been gifted with and the differences are worthwhile and they're worthy. So one is to just always remember the confident, or to reach for that confidence that of the giftings that God's giving you, and the confidence that He is going to complete the work that He started in you. So, and sometimes that's the confidence of knowing that you're okay with the response that you gave. It might look different, but you're okay with that because God is working in and through you. So just having the confidence in the Lord and the confidence in the giftings He's given you is very important. And I know sometimes it can be lonely sitting at the table as being the only one. But I really just try not to focus that I'm the only one. I try just to focus on just the team as a whole. And I've worked for great teams, including the one today that I'm on today. We have an awesome team, and so yeah, that's what I would encourage.
I think that confidence piece is something that is really key, but also super tricky, right?
Very tricky.
Even as I'm thinking on my own just experience and having good and maybe not great experiences of being the only woman in the room or at the table. And I think we can really go two ways, right? Like we can be overly confident in I'm the woman in the room. And so I'm going to make sure that we are bringing, like all of the estrogen to the
representation.
Yes. But then I think there's also a lot of times, and I did this early on and still can kind of get tripped into it today, to where I will maybe take things that are said, or I'll throw out an idea thinking that it's great, and then it'll maybe get shut down. And I really get stuck in that insecurity piece, to where I'm like, well, why didn't they listen? And, my idea was better than their idea, and it ends up becoming kind of this bounce around between my ears of like that insecurity piece. And we can really start to believe the lie. We can really start to, I love how you said the truth that God has for us. Because I think the enemy will really use some of those moments, or maybe that lack of affirmation or lack of them taking our idea. And then Satan will use that in a way to really get us to think like, well, they're not really for us, or they're not really valuing me on the team. And oftentimes when I've gotten stuck in that, it really has been like a miscommunication. It's not even them like, well, I didn't know you were saying that, like if you would have said it clearer, or more succinct, because I tend to speak in like major stories, but like it ends up becoming something of, I didn't understand that that's what you were saying, or, like I thought you were going a different direction. And so many times, especially between brothers and sisters, I think miscommunication ends up getting taken into a lot more deeper insecurities that don't need to be there. And so I think learning how to communicate better, I think learning with that posture of humility that we just kind of talked about before, right? And being able to understand one another to be able to come to the table. And I think the biggest thing is not prove something. If we come in and sit down trying to prove why we deserve that seat, we're not coming humble. We're not coming teachable or adaptable, like we've already talked about. So I love how I think you're really trying to encourage us that one, we've got to have that self-awareness and that security in who God has made us to be, how we're different, why we're there, and then trusting that sometimes he's going to use us in those ways, sometimes even coming from a place where maybe we're not the leader and they go a different route, trusting that, you know what, if this goes wrong, that's okay, because we're all going to learn from the wrong. We're all going to learn from the failure together. So I don't know, does that maybe bring up anything else as I'm talking and storytelling?
I think it's really important to have conversations. And what you said, I get stuck in my head, Jackie. I have a lot of insecurities, and thinking and believing the lies that what you've said is not important. They didn't think what you said was a good idea. But I think one is to fight those lies, obviously, with truth. I always try to falling back on truth, fighting those lies with truth. But also, if you question that, to always have those maybe hard conversations, is that this, asking, did I misread that, or whatever that might be, but to have open communication. That kind of goes back to the peacemaking, because you don't want to have anything between you or really any member of your team, including a brother in Christ. So to have those conversations and to make sure there's most of the time I've misread. Mm-hmm. Most of the time I've created something in my head that's really not there. Yep. And so it's very important to hold that up and to have that conversation.
And honestly, I think whether it's power dynamics or the insecurity piece, like, we will rarely approach a boss, or somebody that we are maybe having to lead under because of those insecurities. And so often we sit in just that feeling of I'm not valued, and the lies and everything. And so even more so, though, I think what I'm finding, and being married to a lead pastor, those kind of things, like being brothers and sisters, we owe one another to have those hard conversations. We owe one another the honor to say, hey, I think I misunderstood you in this way, even to our bosses, because they're human and they may have said it wrong, or they may have said it that day. And so I think, I don't know, it's got to be the power dynamic, or, just the question of what do I do, because so much is attached to it. But being gracious, being honoring, being a peacemaker. I love that that's a theme kind of coming through this episode, and honoring the brothers and the men that we work for, the women even that we work for, to say, hey, I want to serve alongside you well. I want to serve you well. I want to cheer you on in your gifts, and I want to bring my gifts to your weaknesses. And everything always ends up so much stronger when we do that.
Yes, very much so. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I'm kind of saving the hard question for the end. Because I've seen this, I think, even specifically with those that like I've served alongside in our church, to where this role, this position really is working with people a lot, and then working with all of the details of the church or the organization or the ministry or business. And typically you are the front door into the rest of church, or, send whatever it may be. And being at the front door, oftentimes will get you really angry emails. It will get you really mean phone calls, comments sometimes from the really brave and brash, like to your face. And in all honesty, it's not your fault, right? Like, in all honesty, you're the person between the leadership, or between the person that made that decision. But all of the negative, all of the maybe harsh and criticism kind of gets put on you. So I think you are by far, out of all of your giftings, and we were even talking about this before we hit record, like, you are the most amazing people person, and you see people and you love people, and you are just that calming presence. At the same time, I know that has to be something that you choose in the midst of a lot of hard that comes at you. So I think I would love for you to maybe coach us, teach us, talk us down, maybe just from those moments where you're maybe getting a lot dumped on you that is not by any means because of you, but it's because you're the person that's available or accessible. How do you handle days like that? Like, how do you handle moments like that, to where, you're the one there, and it's coming at you? Like, what do you do? Do you cry? Do you?
There have been tears. I try not to cry at the moment. It comes with it really comes with, I feel like the Lord has been growing me in this area since the beginning of the ministry that I helped lead with homeschool and all the way till today. So, and again, I say, for me, this is how God has sanctified me is the relational aspect. And so when someone comes to me, whether it's an irate customer on the phone, it's an email, or it's in person, you know, is I have to remember that they are what I said is what they're bringing to me are probably hurt. I'm just like the icing on the cake. Is that,
Mhm.
if that makes sense? The hurt, whatever they're experiencing, is the icing on the cake, and I'm receiving that. And so I try to remember that and to be as gracious as the Lord. And to lean into the Lord on that, because my initial response on the inside, they don't want to see what's going on the inside of me or my head, but I try to respond graciously, and then maybe there's tears afterwards. But just to remember that on the other side, when we receive hurtful, sinful human responses, it's really easy to respond back that same way, and really to see the Lord through those responses. Whereas we don't want to allow those hurtful responses to skew our view of who God is, right? And so just trying to be Jesus to that person on the other line, whether they're just kind of having a bad day and they're bringing their hurts to the
Mhm.
phone call or their hurts to the email. I've had on occasion, Jackie, people come back and say, I'm sorry, for responding the way I did, and so that's what I try to lean into, is that they're usually bringing hurts and disappointments
Mhm.
to the table when they're expressing something, whether it's be in customer service or ministry, in those relationships.
Mhm. And I think
That
what is unique and kind of hard, like within a church or even within an organization like Church Answers, like you're dealing with believers, like predominantly you are dealing with
Yes,
a brother or a sister, that then is probably not acting so Christ-like,
ex-
and so I do think that I want to kind of bring it to the table of like, this isn't something that um, we're not going to face. And I think a lot of times we think because our Christian life should be so perfect and put together, that like in reality, we're just dealing with humans, and we're dealing with humans that are being sanctified in the moment, including us,
hmm
right? And
yes,
and so I think a lot of times maybe even some of that more bitterness or kind of chip on the shoulder is like, well, if you love Jesus, you would not be treating me this way, or you wouldn't be
yes,
responding this way. Or I know even just from my position, just within ministry or being a pastor's wife, I can be like, you are caring about things that are not a part of the mission. Like get on board. Like this is where Jesus is. You're worried about preferences. And it's
right.
easy to take, I think, some of these tertiary or kind of like things that don't seem to matter to us, and I don't know, ascribe like a spiritual value to them, and like if you really love Jesus, if you're really mature, this is what would be happening. You wouldn't respond this way. But I think one of the things that you said and I'm actually studying a passage, getting ready to teach on this in a few weeks, but the relational side of sanctification, right? That we are being rubbed, we are being tested, like all of those things happen shoulder to shoulder, or through an email, but person to person.
Yes.
And so I think what bigger mission he has given us is to love people, and love in the kingdom is sacrifice. Love in the kingdom is saying the hard truth. Love
Yeah.
in the kingdom is coming alongside on your bad day and offering grace and forgiveness. And so as much as our flesh does not want to do those things, or we feel that disrespect or woundedness or hurt,
hmm
we do have the opportunity to not choose the flesh, but then choose forgiveness and
Yes.
walking alongside. And so I love that, even just the biblical, like spiritual truth that you're teaching there,
Yes.
that we're all on a journey,
We
and
are.
some days we're doing great and some days we're not, along with the
Yes.
people that are journeying alongside us.
I think you have to remember, like you're saying, it is harder when you are dealing with other believers, because the expectation that we have is that that wouldn't happen. But in reality, relationships are messy, Jackie, and relationships are messy between believers. And so, um, so to have that expectation, just to remember that that is messy, and um, to show grace, because I've been on the other side of that, to where I needed to be shown grace for my response.
Mhm.
And yeah, he continues every day to sanctify me in this area. In this area, um, relationships are messy, but loving people is the best.
Mhm. And honestly, loving people in those moments well is honestly what shows them the gospel most.
Exactly.
That's what it's been for me, you know. And
Yes.
so,
Yes. And it's
um,
God through me, because I don't want to puff up and say, oh, I was able to show. But you're exactly right. We're showing another believer,
mhm.
Jesus. And sometimes we need to be shown that. I mean, we're told to preach the gospel to ourselves. And sometimes, that's also preaching the gospel in our reactions and words to someone else. So yeah, I think laying down the responses that we want to have,
Mhm.
and picking up the responses that look like Jesus.
Mm.
You know, it's a hard thing though, Jackie.
So hard, so
I
hard.
have
I know
I have a
everyone
great
says that.
Yes, yes, it's very hard. And then I am an external I like to process with people. I don't like to be in my process, and so I have a great support system. When I do have those bad days, whatever that looks like, whether it's a customer or whether it's just maybe a bad day with work or a bad day with anything, I have a great support system. My husband is my biggest cheerleader. He's my biggest encourager, my biggest supporter. I mean, everyone needs an Adam on their team. He thinks I can do anything. I hate to let him down. I mean, he does. I have to remind him, no, I can't do everything.
Such a good point. And I think a good one to kind of wrap up on because, there is a lot of hard and there is a lot that happens, I think, as God is making us more and more like Jesus. And there's a sifting and a chiseling that hurts a lot of times.
Mhm.
But that is supposed to be done in community and alongside
Mhm.
other people. And I think even
Yes.
more so, like thinking of the women on our church staff or just others that I've had conversations with, I think this position specifically can be really isolating, because you're holding a lot of maybe the negative responses from members or, the hard that is happening within an organization.
Mhm.
And so I think that's such a great just final encouragement of you've got to have other women that are in the trenches with you, that are walking alongside, that are able to give you wisdom and pray
Mhm.
and critique even of, yeah, I think you're taking that a little bit too personal, in that
Yes.
meeting. And no, he wasn't saying that.
Yes.
And so I think it's just a really good encouragement, even from this conversation, to find other women that are leading and loving Jesus and
Mhm.
walking alongside and allow them to come alongside you. So, Jana, goodness, you are such a jewel. And I'm so grateful not only to call you friend, but sister. So why don't you tell maybe some of our listeners are like, yep, I'm the only woman on staff and I have nobody. I don't know what to do. I need her number. I need her email. How do our listeners maybe connect with you?
Sure. I would love to connect with anyone that would like to reach out. They can easily connect with me at Jana, that's Jana, at churchanswers.com. So I would love to connect if anyone wants to.
We were joking about how many emails are connected to church answers, and like she gets 99.9% of them. So,
I
um,
touch a lot of emails during the day.
well, we're so thankful for you. Thank you for joining me on this episode. And I hope that you're encouraged as you listen to not only her heart just for people and serving and using the gifts that God has given. I hope that this even gives you opportunity to kind of maybe do an assessment or even think through like, man, God's made me that way too. And so how can I leverage some order in the midst of chaos? So thank you always for joining us. And we will see you next week for another episode. See you then.